What's up, everybody? Garrett back here. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to the 80s and early 90s. As kids, walking those aisles in the video store, we all remember them. If you were around then, you remember them. Going to that horror section and looking at all these images, these wild images of movies that just felt so forbidden at the time, and your brain is looking at this cover art, flipping this thing around, coming up with what this could be. And man, that's what I want to talk about today, because I have some stuff here that I really want to talk about. It's stuff that's super important in the physical media history of horror and what made me the fan I am today. Now again, there's so many gateways leading into my love for horror. I've talked about some before. I'm going to still talk about more later this week, so keep your eye open. But one of them was about a couple of these images that I saw on the store shelves that when I talked to my uncle when I got a little bit older, they weren't movies at all. Now, what I'm talking about is the first one. I saw Freddy Krueger on the cover, and I remember seeing it at the video store shelves, but I knew it wasn't a Nightmare on Elm Street. What was this? And as I got a little bit older, I had talked to my uncle about it, and I said, what is Weekend of Horrors? And he says, Weekend of Horrors is not a movie. It's actually a documentary called Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors. So if you remember this image, this was the one on the store shelf. You had Freddy Krueger, Elvira, the Troll, everything was on here, and you were kind of like, what is this mix match of horror icons? Now, what this is actually a documentary in 1986 talking about Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors. It was one of the first ever, maybe the first, horror convention where all these horror fans met up, talked about their love of the genre, and got to meet some of their favorites from the movies. We know horror conventions, they are huge nowadays, but back then, they didn't really exist too much. But this documentary here got me so intrigued with the idea of a horror convention that I can remember after seeing this, I said, oh my God, someday I hope to get one of those conventions. And it wasn't until many years later when one came around my way, maybe around 2007, 2008, that I checked out for the first time. Now again, what I love about this is it goes deep into the horror genre, into the horror community. And talking to these people from the 80s just really brings me back. It's like a cozy feeling where you're talking to all these people and they're talking about their full-time job. And it's like, hey, I'm a sales clerk at Sears full-time, but I took the weekend off to come here. And it's these department store type jobs, or jobs that meant a lot back then, that just don't really exist anymore. And that's what I love about this, as well as seeing all these people, these regular people doing their 9-to-5s at all these different places, making that money. But when they got home, they turned that TV on, popped that movie in, watching horror movies all night long. Now that really hits home with me, because I feel like for a long time, that was kind of me. It was like I was one person during the day, and then when I got home, I was doing the horror thing at night. And man, it's so cool to kind of see all these people coming together for the first time. And you got to talk and see a lot of these actors outside the makeup. People like Robert Englund is talking. And then you have directors. You have George Romero, the late Tobe Hooper, Tom Savini. Like, you have all these people on this documentary here talking about the genre and what makes horror so special. When it comes to this, I used to have the VHS. I had sold it when I picked this up. I picked this up at probably my first ever horror convention. It's considered a bootleg, I would say, but it's a very nice bootleg. I mean, you've got artwork on the disc. You've even got like some kind of insert here. But yeah, this is definitely a really, really cool documentary. I think this is an absolute must for any horror fan. This was a big thing in the 80s. I remember seeing this on store shelves at mom and pop shops, Blockbuster Video even. But at the time I was so young in 1986, I never was able to rent this until years later. But man, such an important part of horror physical media, of horror in general, that I think all fans need to check out. Now, very similar story. The artwork on this always grabbed me. But when I got a little bit older, I asked my uncle, same thing, what's this movie about? And he said, it's not a movie, but it's definitely a documentary you need to check out if you want to start really learning a little bit more about horror. And that is Tom Savini's Scream Greats. Now, look at this image here. How cool is that? You have Jason, Creepshow. I mean, so cool here. I'm sure you remember this one hanging around your shelves as well at your local video store. But this was not a movie. This was actually talking about practical effects and Tom Savini's history with practical effects. It says Tom Savini, master of horror effects. Again, it's also kind of incorporated with Fangoria, Starlog, stuff like that, putting a tape like this out. And the reason I wanted to do this video is I recently acquired this tape, which I actually never owned in my life. Danny over at Cinestalker, thank you, Danny, was getting rid of this, and I was like, oh my God, I would love to have that. It's such an iconic tape that I would love to have in my collection. Sure enough, he sent it over, and man, thank you so much for this. But this is iconic in the 80s on those VHS shelves, but it was a documentary talking about the practical effects in horror, which I'm an absolute sucker for. Practical effects is still always going to be my jam. I absolutely love them. This is a real cool documentary. But if you say, Garrett, where am I going to get that tape? I don't even have a VCR. Now I got to go try to find that tape. I really want to see this. I don't know if it's on YouTube. It could be, but it is on a Blu-ray. Now, it doesn't have its own Blu-ray. It's got a Blu-ray from Synapse Films and Red Shirt Pictures because Slippy did a documentary on Creepshow called Just Desserts, which came out many, many years ago. And it's a real awesome documentary talking all things Creepshow. But as a special feature on here, you do get that Savini Scream Greats as a special feature. And man, that's the way I was watching this thing for a long time because, like I said, I didn't have the tape. Felt like I didn't need the tape after I got this because I was like, this is it, I have it. But seeing that artwork and seeing how iconic this is in physical media horror history, I needed to get it. But if you want to check it out, find Just Desserts. I think it's still available, I hope. But it's on there as a special feature, and it's really, really cool. All right, now the third big one I want to talk about, the one that I saw at the movie store that I was like, whoa, what is this? And again, same story. Go back to my uncle and say, what's this one? Because I was always asking him specific movies that I saw on the shelf if it was worth a rent or not. And he said the same thing. He says, you want to rent that because I'm showing you a lot of this stuff, but this is going to show you even more horror movies that you may be intrigued by. And that's a documentary called Terror in the Aisles. Now, this is a real cool documentary, very similar to what we see now with things like In Search of Darkness. Not as detailed, but you had Donald Pleasance here going over just different movies and scenes and iconic horror moments that, man, it really introduced me to a lot of movies checking this thing out back in the day. And I still have a fascination with this movie. It's a cozy movie. You can put this on in the background and just chill. This is a Blu-ray put out by Scream Factory. So this was awesome that they gave this a standalone edition. It is not one that I have anymore on VHS. I do want to reacquire this. I did have it, but it's been long gone for a long time because this did see the light of day on Blu-ray. Now, it didn't have its own Blu-ray before the Scream Factory one, but if you don't have that and you have this, which is Halloween 2, it's this 30th anniversary edition put out by Universal. This is actually a special feature on here. So if you look at the back, it says Terror in the Aisles is on this here. So if you have this edition laying around somewhere and you're like, oh, I've always wanted to see that documentary, it's on here. So if you weren't aware, Terror in the Aisles is on this Halloween 2 disc. So boom, you get the Scream Factory release and you've got it on here. So either or, guys, it's an easy way to track this down, and it's so worth it. Now, I wanted to keep this 80s. There's so many 70s documentaries I could have talked about. There's 90s documentaries I could have talked about. There's 2000s documentaries I could have talked about, but I wanted to keep it in this realm because if you like talking about this stuff and reminiscing about some of these really cool horror documentaries, I've got tons, guys. I've got tons of horror documentaries that were put out on physical media throughout the years. But the ones I want to talk about today, I think are probably the three most iconic. In the heyday of horror, in the 80s where horror was booming, these were the three that you could get on video store shelves. And like I said, you had Fangoria's Weekend of Horror. This talked about conventions. That's always been a real cool piece of the horror community is these conventions where you can go and see the celebrities and meet like-minded people. And some people may say horror conventions are not like they used to be. You're right, they're not when it comes to money. But man, going there and meeting like-minded people and meeting up with friends is what I really like about horror conventions now. Luckily, I was doing the horror convention scene since the mid-2000s, so when it comes to autographs and stuff like that, I have most of the people I want to meet. So now it just is more about checking the vendors, looking for physical media, any cool items, meeting up with people. That's what I really like about it. And this showcases a lot of that as well. So it shows the celebrities, it shows like-minded people, it shows some vendors, This is a real cool one. You definitely need to check this and hunt it down. Number 2, you get the practical effects side, which makes horror so unique in itself, especially in the 80s. You get the practical effects side. And the last one is you get all the different must-see horror movies. So between these 3 right here, these I think are the most iconic gateways into horror. And anybody, young, old, if you haven't seen these, I highly recommend tracking them down. So guys, once again, let me know if you remember any of these that I talked about today. What are your memories of these? If you haven't seen any of these, I highly recommend tracking them down and hopefully able to help you find a way to watch some of these things. And like I said, they could be on YouTube, I don't know. But as far as other editions of these movies, there are some available out there. Weekend of Horrors being the hardest one to find. If that's on another special feature somewhere, I'm just not familiar with it, but hopefully I can help. And like I said, if you like this kind of talk and you want to talk about more horror documentaries that you need to check out, like I said, I've got tons that I can bring to the table. But man, I love going back in time, love talking about gateways into the genre. That's huge for me. It's why I'm here now. And again, if you like talking gateways, I've got the most gateway horror-related item that I want to talk about later this week. So definitely stay tuned. Thank you so much for checking this out. Like, subscribe if you're into this kind of stuff. This is Garrett at Born2beRad, and like always, stay